For me, when I was a child, there was nothing quite like the feeling of stepping into our local BlockBuster. My father worked in the film industry, and so from an early age, I was subjected to the world of cinema and its finer workings. Stepping through the sliding automatic doors and being greeted with the sight of any movie my young brain could have desired was captivating. I still have fond memories of walking up and down the aisles, looking at VHS covers, just waiting for a title or cover art to pop out and interest me enough to want to watch it. For me, it was complete creative freedom, and for my parents, it was a cheap way to keep their child quiet for a few hours. I loved those VHS tapes that came in those clunky plastic covers that had a glossy shine and would snap open. I would get older, but the tradition never changed. Every Friday night, my parents would take me to BlockBuster, or my mum would if Dad was working. I would pick out 2 movies, one for Friday night and one for Saturday. My taste evolved as I got older, of course. Cartoon dinosaurs faded away, replaced by action stars and slashers, and sometimes more lifelike dinosaurs. Eventually, BlockBusters started renting out video games, and that for me was, sorry for this, a game changer. As the well of teenage emotions started filling up, movie nights with my folks transformed into junk food-fueled nights of gaming, desperately trying to experience everything the game had to offer before I had to return it. I'm sure others could see the downfall of BlockBusters happening as the market began to prefer shipped products and digital media. For me though, the change happened within just a month. My trips to the store was less frequent as I got on in years and started to explore other avenues of acquiring media, but I would still make the occasional trips. I almost felt guilty if enough time passed without me visiting. On one of my visits, I had seen several deals were taking place with big signs eccentrically stating new promotions. One of the telltale signs of declining business. Something just trying to recoup losses. With my next visit, the lights are off and the shelves are being cleared, and that marked the end of my tradition. Years would go by, and I would find myself following in my father's footsteps. My innate love for cinema and the knowledge my dad passed on to me guided me into a field of filmmaking. Silly little slasher indie films shot on a camcorder with my friends, movies that I thought had a deep and meaningful message that I can only describe now as pretentious nonsense. I started picking up speed after college and was starting to get some semblance of notoriety in the film community. Fame had far from struck, but I was a ways off from where my father ended his career, but I was content. The visits to BlockBuster had become distant but pleasant memories, the kind I would recall on bleak, rainy days or sleepless nights. As far as I was concerned, every BlockBuster had shut down and the franchise was just gone. One night, I had lamented this to my friend while I was editing one of my passion projects. I couldn't help but think how cool it would be to have a movie I had a hand in making resting on one of those shelves. The bargain bin at Walmart just doesn't have the same appeal. She was borderline jubilant to explain that there was still a BlockBuster up and running, that it even had a social media handle. Focusing on my project became nearly impossible as we dived deeper into plans to visit the location. It wasn't nearly as far of a trip as I thought. It was surprising I hadn't heard of this place, living so close. While I waited for the trip, I finished my movie and burned it onto a DVD. Even got one of my friends to do the cover art. My movie was going on that shelf, even if it was just for a moment. I would mark the memory. The day came in seemingly no time, and with a full bag of junk food, we headed out. The drive only took about a day, but I couldn't have been giddier. Some part of me deep down was nervous when I pulled into the parking lot. It sounds silly, but it was like seeing an old friend after years apart. Like I didn't know what to say or talk about, despite having a whole life of experiences. Pulling into the parking lot paled in comparison to walking through the doors. This surge of nostalgia and novelty washed over me, and I was thrown into the days of my youth. Movies lined the walls, and snacks sat by the checkout. Even the smell felt familiar. How can something like a smell stay so consistent after all those years? We spent hours in there, talking with the staff and rummaging through various aisles, looking at movies that we'd never heard of. The place was pretty busy too. Just people shopping for movies or taking selfies. It was so surreal, and once the nostalgia started to fade, it felt like it always had, and I liked that. Before we knew it, the sun was starting to go down and the store had become empty, apart from the manager and us. We had talked to the manager quite a bit and even got to gush about the film we were making, so she allowed us to stay while she started closing up. The front doors locked, the lights dimmed, and we continued to chat while she tallied up the day's work. The store took on a different atmosphere once the traffic had vanished and we were left alone. The hum of the overhanging fluorescents and the blinking red light from the security camera behind the counter pulled at my attention. I eyed the red light as it went on and off. "Does that record all night?" I asked the woman, shuffling through paper bills. She replied that it was certainly supposed to. Looking at the black lens of the camera, I could make out the faintest outline in its reflection. Something off. Then, the blinking red light stopped. I looked back down. I told the manager that the blinking had ceased. She didn't move for a moment, and then looked up at the camera. When it failed to blink, she quickly rose up from her seat and told us to follow her. The words were hurried and almost felt like we were being scolded, but we did so anyway. We made our way into an office that was closed off from the rest of the store. In the room was a desk, a safe, and various piles of paper documents. There was also a set of overhanging TVs that were displaying the live camera feed. When I looked at the camera feeds, I was surprised to see that someone else was still in the store. When I attempted to tell the manager about the person, she just replied that she already knew about him. The manager was moving papers all around while mumbling to herself. She was saying, "Where is it?" over and over. Just under the TV screens, there was an old VHS player and a series of wires connected to it that ran into small holes in a square and metal panel. Interrupting her chanting, the manager told us to let her know if the man on the TV started to move. Staring at the old man, dressed in khakis and a polo shirt, I was confused about how I hadn't seen him after the doors were locked. I could see my friend's eyes were glued to the feed, so I backed away, just enough to see outside of the door. Shifting my gaze between the interior of the store and the feed on the TV, I felt myself let out a chuckle. "I think the feed is broken," I exclaimed to the manager as I looked out into the rest of the store. "There's no one there." "He needs to be recorded," the manager replied, almost completely ignoring me. I felt a prickle of curiosity. That was when a car drove by, and its headlights flooded into the store, cascading beams through the shelves. I heard my friend exclaim that he could see the light of the car caused on the camera, that the feed was live. She had even seen my shadow shifting when I was looking back and forth from the screen and store. Keeping my eyes fixated on the camera feed, my wonder shifted to uncertainty and spiraled into horror when the old man stepped forward. His movements were rigid and shaky, causing artifacts on the feed. It was like he was thawing out, so his muscles weren't capable of smooth movements. My voice shook, but I told the manager about his advance, and at the same time, she exclaimed that she found what she was looking for. A small keychain that held just one bronze key. The camera feed started to fizzle, like a wave of static had corrupted it. The lights within the store started to brighten, and the soft glow they had during the day shifted to a harsh and obnoxious white. The man took another step as the manager plunged the key into a slot on the metal panel. I took a glance out the office door, doing my best to shield my eyes from the light and get a look at what was out there. Though I couldn't see the old man with my own eyes, I could tell where he was. Space, where he existed on camera, was distorted. It was like the blocky and out-of-focus textures on a poorly rendered video game, and with each step he made forward, the effect's radius expanded. The carpet of the store that was under where his feet would be started to take on the same static effect you'd get from a satellite TV. Looking back to the manager, I watched her messing around with a collection of wires, this time whispering, "Please," to herself. When she was satisfied with her work, she stepped back and looked up at the TVs. The old man was still stepping forward, spreading his distortion into our world like a virus. But it became apparent he was slowing down. Slowly, he and the effects he brought with him started to halt their progress. The manager let out a heavy sigh as the bizarre effects around the man began to dissipate. She looked at both of us, surely noticing our awe-struck expressions. "He needs to be recorded," she repeated. This time, those words were more of a threat. The nostalgia in that BlockBuster was unmatched for me. Even after that experience, I was able to get the picture from my DVD sitting on the shelf. When you walk into that store, you might feel like your younger self again, like you are lost to time. In that store, there is a being that is truly lost to time though, one that needs to be recorded or he'll start to catch up. That store needs to remain running. A careful watch needs to remain on the mechanics of that VHS player. I'd hate to imagine what would happen if a being like that was able to roam free. I loved visiting that store, but I don't see myself ever going back. Some things should stay in the past. Even now, as I look at the picture of my DVD sitting on the shelf, I can see the old man. It's just his head, peeking over the line of movies, but I can see his face clear as day. The brown liver spots and ghostly white hair, his bright and almost unnatural yellow eyes, and a smile. A beaming smile, one that knows it has all the time it needs, because even the last BlockBuster will have to close someday.